So hello everyone, thank you so much for joining us today. I am very pleased to be presenting to you Chantelle Nicholson, who will be talking to us about her work in her two different restaurants in London, Treadwell's and the newly opened All Is Well, which is the sustainability focused pop-up in Hackney. I'm a hospitality professional with experience in luxury to farm to table and zero waste restaurants, and a massive fan of Chantelle, who has eaten in her restaurant as my favorite spot in my local neighborhood in Covent Garden. So we will start with talking about what Chantelle is up to right now. We'll look at how she has kept her team motivated throughout the pandemic, and perhaps some of her plans for reopening. So without further ado, Chantelle, please, the stage is yours. Introduce yourself, and then we start with some questions.
Sure, thank you for that. So I think you kind of summed it up well. I've got two restaurants, both which are closed right now, obviously, although All's Well is open for takeaways, just on a Friday and a Saturday. And I guess, part of me being here today was I was invited by Dominique to, I guess it's talking, overall about the hospitality and also about how, I guess, my passion for sustainability, for want of a better word, which is a bit of a 360 approach in my view. So that's why I think sometimes the word doesn't quite explain everything. But I think the last 12 months have probably been pretty interesting and challenging for all of us on here. And I think definitely have been a lot of learnings from that. A lot of challenges, but also a lot of positives as well, I think.
Mm-hmm. And we know that you actually opened All's Well just before the pandemic. So we'd like to hear a little bit about that. How it
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it was actually a pandemic baby, I call it. So it was born out of the pandemic. I guess it was at a point where we reopened Treadwell's in August. We waited a bit longer, just due to the location, really, given the fact that Covent Garden was kind of, I guess, vacated overnight, literally, with lack of theatres, lack of tourists, lack of office workers. So I always thought Treadwell's would take quite a bit longer to kind of get back up to speed, really. And we had a pretty good August. The Eat Out to Help Out scheme was really beneficial. It felt really good to kind of back in the groove of things. And then the further restrictions kept kind of coming at us. And I think literally kind of overnight things just, we had some good bookings on the books. And literally when they announced I think it was the no mixing of households, etc., whatever those were back in the day. Everything kind of dropped off a bit of a cliff. So I was kind of left in a situation where I had, kind of the resource to do a lot, but kind of no space to do it in. And so, I guess I'm feeling a little bit helpless at that point. And so one of my team, Beth, who Elena, actually came up with the idea of, why don't we see if we can do a little pop-up somewhere or do something else. And that's kind of how All's Well was born. So it was a very kind of quick process. I think we first looked at the site, I think in late September, and literally within kind of a month we were in and open. Wow. I think we got the keys 10 days before opening and literally went in there, painted, redecorated, used a lot of things. My kind of ethos with it was, or my want for it was, I didn't get anything new for it. Everything was repurposed. So whether that was bought secondhand or it was, donated. I was very lucky to get some wonderful suppliers who supported me. Unox ovens, they gave me an oven to use, and a couple of others that kind of really supported. So we kind of got up and running on the 29th of October, only to kind of have to lock down 5 days later, and then managed 10 days in between the second and the third lockdown of operating. So in total we've had 15 days of service, but really looking forward to opening our doors back up on the 19th of May to actually, get the ball rolling.
Wow. But I'm aware that during this the pandemic as well, you have been able to do some deliveries, right?
Yeah, so when the pandemic first hit in March last year, we first had the effect of it. So um, straight away, that was at a time where you couldn't get, a lot of groceries were very scarce, but obviously we could still get kind of supplies from our suppliers. So very quickly we kind of transformed into a bit of a grocery delivery service, and we did some meals as well. And that was a huge learning curve because it was at a point where none of the systems that are now kind of super easy to use and to kind of onboard. We just did everything manually ourselves. So there was a lot of Excel spreadsheets and a lot of kind of figuring of things out. But people were really grateful for it because they could get things that they couldn't get from the store, and also didn't have to leave their house. So we did that for about just over a week, actually, before the first lockdown. And then when the lockdown happened, I just felt a bit conflicted about kind of asking the team to come into work. So we decided to just kind of I guess shut up shop. And then we started the at home trip hours to go again. Oh gosh, I can't remember. Maybe that was September actually. And then from December onwards, we did a New Year's Eve box, a Valentine's box, and a Mother's Day box, which were just kind of good little ways to keep things going, get the team together again, and kind of, I guess, keep the brand alive, really.
Mm-hmm. And looking at all these ups and downs during this pandemic, how do you think you managed to keep your team motivated? What were the main points that you think kept them going?
I think it's been, I guess, a real journey, I would say. And I think when the lockdown first happened, I was really conscious of keeping in communication with them, making sure they were okay, making sure they had what they needed. I kind of sent them off all with a little grocery pack when we first went into lockdown to make sure they kind of had some essentials, and just was really kind of conscious of keeping in touch with them kind of on a weekly basis just to make sure they were all okay. And we created a kind of WhatsApp group so that everyone could share what they were cooking, and just little things that they were doing. So it kind of just kept that connectivity, which I thought was really important. And some of them, actually a lot of them, aren't from the UK, so they were kind of stranded here almost in some respects. And that also, for me, it was important that they felt that there was support for them. And then we decided when we were allowed to open, I felt that so much had kind of changed in the world that I wanted to create some kind of positive change within the restaurant as well at Treadwell's. So we actually all got our DIY on and did a lot of sanding of tables and painting, and just kind of did our own little DIY refurb, really, which was a really positive thing because it gave it a slightly different look and feel. So brightened it all up, freshened it all up, which was also important, having not been there for kind of 3 months. It was important that I felt we had that kind of renewed lease of energy in there. And everyone was super excited to get back. Obviously, things were very different with the social distancing, with all the rules, and having to we wore face masks from the beginning. So just kind of adjusting and coping to all of that. There was a lot to take on, and I did notice that a lot of people had, with that kind of lengthy time off, they'd kind of little things that had come naturally to them pre-closure. Things took a bit longer to actually, I guess, get back into the swing of things. And I think with that, there needed to be a level of understanding, but also a level of motivation to be able to, provide them with something that they hadn't had for 3 months, which I think was really important. So I think, from my perspective, it's very much about involving the team as much as possible and allowing them to contribute and that's, if it's from ideas to actually making things happen, implementation. I think that's, for me, that's what used to motivate me, was feeling part of something. So I think that from my perspective, it was important that that's what I created for my team. And I guess kind of the epitome of that was Allswell, that we kind of started with nothing and created something very quickly. Most restaurants have opened have been over a year in the kind of preparation, and this was kind of a few weeks, which was actually really exciting and gave us something positive to look forward to at the time, which was much needed as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you. I suppose creativity and people getting their hands dirty and feeling that they really part of what you're building keeps them motivated, for sure. I wonder how the sustainability component has motivated them as well, because I know that is part of your focus for many years now, starting from Treadwell. So it's definitely not something new in your operations. But of course, with this new pop-up, it's just a different model. So do you think that was part of keeping them motivated as well for something new? And
yeah, I think it's very much, I feel like sometimes I was, right at the beginning, when things were, there wasn't much known about certain things within the industry. I think it did sometimes feel like I was kind of dragging them along behind me, or, pushing them out in front of me. Whereas now I feel very much that we're on it together. And everyone is motivated to, find the best way to do something. And I think with, I guess to me, it's a little bit of throwing the rule book out the window and saying, well, why do we do that? Do we have to do it? Or is there a better way to do it? Is there a different way to do it? And I think it kind of, I guess COVID sped up that process of just wanting to make things as regenerative as possible as well, really. And wanting to ensure that, there was as little waste as possible, that, our outputs in terms of what we were, emitting versus or rubbish, etc., was very much kept to the minimum that it could be. Obviously, there are a few curveballs with COVID in terms of, PPE, things like that people were very conscious about single use, whereas for me, that's kind of the opposite. So sometimes there was a bit of a conflicting path, I guess, and it was just figuring out how, what was best practice for us to be able to move forward. But I think now, the team are super motivated and interested. And I think it is very much a journey. It's not a destination. I think there's so much unknown that we're kind of, and I don't by any means have even, I'd say, a quarter of the answers to everything, but I like the fact that we can, I like the fact that it is ongoing and it is something that we can keep learning about, and just trying to improve on.
Absolutely. We have a question from Dominique in the chat. She's asking whether you think your commitment to sustainability gives your team a sense of wider purpose.
Yeah, I think so, because I think my approach to sustainability is probably quite 360. So that involves people and community, as well as things like climate change and single-use plastics, etc., and food waste. I think it's the whole 360 approach, and I think it's very much about just seeing how we can do things better, and that's within that what I really. One of the big drivers for Allswell was the fact that it's in a neighbourhood, it's in a community. Covent Garden's a very transient area of London, so there's not that same opportunity to be able to, be part of a community. So I think that actually, that wider purpose of, I guess people and planet as well as profit is very much a motivator for everybody.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. You recently spoke on Cater about encouraging more people to take hospitality as a career. What do you think are the elements for making this a real reality? And
there's a lot, actually. I would say. I think change has happened within the industry, but I think there's still a way to go. But I also feel that there needs to be a shift in consumer behaviour. Probably more so than anything in some respects. I think the the true value of what it costs to eat a plate of food in a restaurant. And that's from, the ingredients on the plate to the people that have actually put them there and created what they've created. I felt that, pre-pandemic, it was very much a price war, I would say, on who could kind of come up with the cheapest offer of food, or, an eating out experience. It became very, very driven by price. And I think that wasn't a sustainable business model at all. And I think that was almost forcing, restaurants to find, the cheapest way of doing things, not necessarily the best or the most balanced. And I think that kind of led to, kind of not great things happening, really. So I think that to be able to actually attract people into the industry, it's, the view of it slightly needs to change. And I think I'd hoped, when the first lockdown happened and restaurants were closed and everyone was excited to get back to them, I was really hopeful that there would be a different kind of perspective from guests. And I think there was a little bit to start with, especially from some. I think this time around, given it's been a 5-month plus lockdown, again, I think I'm hoping that there's even more of a significant change, and that people will have a kind of newfound respect for what people that work in the hospitality industry actually do. I think in terms of attracting people, it's very much about showing and it's not kind of, whitewashing it or anything. It's actually just showing what the industry is about, how amazing it is, because I think it's so diverse, and it literally can offer something for everybody. And I think that's what's not talked about enough. I also feel that all the TV programs that have kind of sensationalized aggressive kitchens have not helped, because I think parents probably weren't that happy if they were told that their, child was kind of thinking about a career in that kind of industry. So I think there's a lot to be done, but I think there's definitely steps, lots of steps in the right direction.
I can also relate in terms of your current staff, and Beth, again, as an example, who I remember, she said she started in the kitchen with you, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it looks like you do allow organic development with your team, and you actually let her take on so much responsibility that she helped you grow to such level right now. And we have a comment in the chat about how some businesses who shout for sustainability and claim to be sustainable actually don't really encounter ethics of taking care of their people in their strategy. And I think you do the opposite. So I wonder if you have any comments on that.
Yeah, I think there's that's why I think the word sustainability doesn't say enough. Because I think it's, and also we don't want to sustain things, we want to improve them. So, and I think that there is, I guess that kind of what's termed greenwashing, where it's kind of a bit of a box ticking exercise about what people do and don't, and also what people say they do versus what they actually do, which I've seen firsthand, where kind of restaurant groups have said, we do this, we're kind of zero waste, we're all this, and then, being in their kitchen and there's no separation of waste. And it's kind of like, well, that's, you're kind of not really doing what you say you're doing. And that's not to kind of be, highlighting anything, but I think it's also about that level of, everyone being on board with it. And I think it shouldn't be a marketing ploy. I think that's where probably it can slip up, because actually, unless everyone's living and breathing it, it's not going to work. And you're not going to be, because someone will always think, oh, well, it doesn't matter if I put that in this bin, or it doesn't matter if I throw away X, Y, Z. So I think it's, unless you've actually, people believe in it, it probably won't get that far, won't get beyond a marketing kind of department in some ways, or a top level. So I think it's really kind of understanding the reasons why you're doing it. And I think as a, business, it's really important that message is actually communicated as to the why, not just the what.
What was pretty amazing is that the Michelin Guide introduced this green Michelin star lately, but there's always some contradicting opinions regarding all sorts of accreditations. So I wondered what that meant to you and for your team. If you want to answer this question.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was something that I hadn't really, I guess I'd heard about them being launched in other countries probably beginning of last year. But I don't think I was actually aware if they were doing it in, this time around, especially with everything that got shifted, etc., because of COVID. So I was actually on the tube when it kind of was announced, and got all this flurry of messages from the team actually to start with. But they were all so excited by it, and I think it really it was almost an affirmation, I guess, in some senses of what we were doing. And I think for them in particular, some of them who have come from Michelin backgrounds, in the kitchen or even in front of house, it was like a real, we've been recognized for what we're doing because we are doing something that's a good thing, a positive thing. And yeah, so they were super excited by it. And I think it just, it solidified the reasons why we were doing things and actually made it even more important in some ways. And I think to even, it holds us accountable as well when there's we question things. It's like, well, does that fit with that, that accolade? We need to make sure we're on that path. And I think it's very different to an actual Michelin star, and the fact that for me, I feel like we've kind of just started the journey. So it's almost like if we can get it this early on, then that's amazing because, we don't have that fear of losing it. It's actually great. We can kind of maintain and actually make things even better moving forward as well.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And it's all about developing, this benchmark perhaps that can also motivate other businesses to adopt more ethical practices to their operations. Going back to the team's spirit, do you think that, well, one of your team actually members said that described your working environment as a stimulating one where creativity, passion, and curiosity are so prized. And I think that's what we've been talking about earlier. So do you think there's a way we can change this perspective? Do you think perhaps UK Hospitality, for example, could launch a national campaign to support change? And where do you think this change lies beyond the demand from the consumer, as you spoke about earlier, when it comes to what can we do from hospitality part?
I think after the year we've just had to kind of ask more of people does feel a bit tricky. But I think just to, maybe it's not even about necessarily doing anything proactively. I think it's just more that consciousness of shouting about how much we love what we do. I think that's part of it. And, actually showcasing the team members that do as well. And I think, there is a bit of, I guess it's like any industry in some respects. And I think, the media, I feel sometimes is really quick to jump on the negatives. It's also really quick to jump on I think especially in the chef world, how can I say this eloquently? It's the same usual suspects you see, kind of that are asked to comment, that are kind of championed. And from my perspective, it's, we're past that. We need the new. I think, yes, I have a huge amount of respect for, I guess, what you would term the old guard in some respects, but I think they're also not the ones that are championing how to move forward, because that wasn't part of their way of growing up or their career paths. And I think it's time that more of the, not necessarily even younger, but I think the ones that have come to it a bit later on and a bit newer to it have a huge amount to contribute. And I don't think their voices are heard enough, to be honest. And I think even if you look at industry press or even, non-industry media over the last 12 months, it's the same faces that you see and it's the same kind of comments that you see. And I think there needs to be a better range of diversity in that moving forward, to be able to promote our industry as being, a really great place to be, and that has a diverse offering for, a diverse people.
You made some really great points there, because it is indeed a lot of saturation in press, with the same faces and same promises coming up all the time. Again, another question in the chat. They were interested to hear about Beth's progress with you over the years, and they're asking if you're able to talk more about how you helped your own team see their career with you in the long term, and how you celebrate their success.
I think from my perspective, I've never been one for a really structured approach to it. I think because I probably came at it from a very different angle when I first started in the industry. And so, for some people that's great, for some people it's not. They want a lot of structure, and they want a clear kind of, plan, whereas I'm very much more about, a bit more of the moment. I think it's more, you may think you want to do X, but actually once you get into things, your path may kind of, verge. So I think it's, for me, keeping an open mind about what that could entail. And I think with what I've done in my, in the last 17 years I've been in London, has been a very kind of jagged path in some respects. And I think that's what's allowed me to get to this point where I'm very clear about what I want moving forward, and really what I want to achieve with the team. And I think again, it's almost bringing them on that journey, and I guess exposing them to a lot of things. And, if someone comes and says to me, actually, I'd really like to try this, then I'll find a way of making it happen. But I need them to also support in that as well. It's very much, a team approach. It's not me saying, right, this is what you need to do it. I think it needs to be that sense of ownership and responsibility, and I will support them to the hilt. But again, it's there is that level. It's a relationship. It's not kind of a dictatorial scenario. It's very much about a team approach. And I think celebrating success, I think there's always more I feel I want to do, and hopefully will be able to do in the future. But I think if people feel really valued, and they feel that their opinions are valued, and they feel that they can contribute, then I think that's a huge part of it. And I think that, being able to celebrate in small ways is really important. And whether that's just acknowledging something in front of others, or it's a shout out to them about something they've done, I think that's important. And sometimes, but then also you need everyone to be on that wavelength too, because again, it's, I don't want to be in a position where it's all on me, that I'm the one that has to say well done, because I think it needs to be that team approach, and actually everyone needs to support each other. So I think it's very much about, it's a bit of as I said, it's a journey, and I think it's not most journeys aren't necessarily structured in terms of life, and I think that's kind of the way it falls within the industry as well. And also I think with what's happened in the past 12 months, it's kind of completely turned things upside down, but created some great benefits and great pluses out of it, as well as the challenges. So I think it's always being able to try and see the silver lining in everything that's important.
Absolutely, exposing opportunities and making them feel that it's in their hands to do what they can to reach there, and you have all the energy and motivation to support them in that. So do you think there's certain steps or advice you can give to hospitality businesses when it comes to motivating their team with the reopening? Because it takes so much courage and effort to get back on track and on our feet.
Yeah, it takes a lot. And I think that was the first, I think it felt, we'd kind of done it 3 times, and it's kind of like, right, here we go again. But I think what I found really, what worked well for my team was actually, I think, bring them on board with it all, And I think before we opened in August last year, I actually kind of got everyone around a Zoom table, and said, okay, we've got this opportunity to do things differently. So what are the things that frustrate us about, I guess pre-COVID? So let's talk about all of those things and let's see if there's a way we can change them. Some things we can't change, but let's try and see what we can do about the ones that we can. So I think, again, that real inclusion is what motivates a lot of people. Doesn't motivate all of them, to be honest. I think it's maybe figuring out what does motivate different people, and how you can bring that to the table so that everyone can benefit from it, really, in terms of the team as well as the individual, and just make it so that there is I think that common goal is really important, that everyone is on that page with it, to be able to create what you want to create from a business perspective as well.
Again, in the chat, someone says that the session today supporting mental health highlighted that mental health training should be part of induction for companies. What are your thoughts coming out of this pandemic? Do you second that?
100%. I think mental health has always been high on my agenda, especially for the team. And I think it was kind of, I guess, compounded with COVID, because I think it really, there's been huge negative impacts on people's mental health. And I think it's something that's, will continue moving forward as well. So it's really important that it's acknowledged. We've just probably about 25% of my team have been trained as mental health first aiders, so that they can recognise, it is a bit like first aid, really. You need people to be trained. And I think, legally we have to have so many first aiders on site at any time. And I think we need to get to that point with mental health first aiders as well. So for anyone who is interested in kind of that training, there's an organisation called Kelly's Cause, which does mental health training. Really wonderful, amazing kind of organisation. So that's a really beneficial tool, and I think it's something that's, shouldn't be a kind of optional. You should make sure that it's in line with all the other kind of legislative things that we need to do as a food business, or as a restaurant business as well.
Absolutely. I mean, I don't know if I'm being ignorant or just haven't been lucky, but I've worked in the industry in London for 7 years, and I never came across the mental health first aiders scheme before. So it sounds definitely something like we should all adopt. And thank you for bringing it up. I wonder if you've lost a lot of team members during the pandemic that you think they might not be coming back, either because they've moved out of London, or Brexit being in the middle as well. And how do you go on about finding new people that you can trust, that can support you in your future plans?
Yeah, so we did, when the kind of first lockdown happened, we probably lost about 40% of the team, because they did go back to the various countries they were from, which was completely understandable. And I would have, almost encouraged them to do that, because I think with what's happened as well, it was important that they were with family and friends. I think moving forward, it's been interesting seeing the kind of explosion of recruitment that's just happened in the last kind of 6 weeks. And I think we've been incredibly lucky that, I've got people that have been with me for, kind of 10 years. I've got some that have been for 10, some that have been for kind of 6, 5, even a couple. And that creates a real sense of family in some ways. And quite often, where I've encouraged people to go and see something different, they will come back as well, which is a win-win for anyone, because it's, they've gone and got a new perspective, or seen new things, to then come back and bring them into the operation, which is amazing. I think also what's really interesting is, because of, I think, potentially the Green Star, but also just, I guess, the ethos that we do have people that contact us directly and say, look, we really want to work for a business like yours. do you have any opportunities? So that's worked really well for us in terms of that organic, searches that people have come to us. And I think already you've kind of got them, you know that they're invested in that part of the journey, which is really wonderful to start with. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see what happens from kind of 17th of May moving forward with the industry, because pre-pandemic we were in a really tricky spot with teams and having enough staff. So I think now Brexit's happened as well, I think there's probably going to be some significant kind of fallout, really, unfortunately.
Thank you so much for sharing these insights. I think it's so important to show that you're open to also accept people back from the past, and show that you do recognize that every step just brings more to their experience and diversity in their mindset, which is so important. I think at this stage we could open the discussion to the audience, as we have about 10-15 minutes left. Shall we do that? Because I think Owen had a comment earlier in the chat, which I encouraged him to bring up.
Yeah, hi there. Yeah, I was thinking years ago, I think it's about 20 years ago, I used to develop a community kitchen and training school in rural Suffolk, and we had a lovely time. It was really, because we were in a small market town, we had different producers that we could buy from, butchers who had locally reared meats, and it was a really nice experience. So the people I was training to become kind of, this is very kind of basic level kind of chefs and cooks, people just really starting out, especially people with additional needs. So teaching them life skills at the same time as catering. And I just found it brought so much value by working with local producers and suppliers to really understand where stuff comes from, but also kind of how we use it as well. And the seasonality side was really good. And then later on, I ran a community cafe in Ipswich, and where, again, we used to have students that would go out to local farms and producers to go and help pick the items we needed, which really just gave people context to where things come from. And I just think that's a really good way to inspire people and get them connected to your business, but also to their journey. And we're very much like a really short time. They'd be with us for a short time, build confidence, build skills, and build a CV, have some qualifications and a reference. And we could then support them into the industry they wanted to move in, or the area of the industry they wanted to move into, if it was barista or front of house or whatever. So yeah, we had a nice time. It was good. For 2 decades ago, for a long time ago now.
No, it sounds absolutely amazing. It's almost a dream to be able to, as you say, go actually visit producers and suppliers and pick up what you need is absolutely incredible. And I think there's a lack of context these days, especially with young children, I found, and that, you can walk into a supermarket and buy asparagus all year round, buy strawberries all year round. There's no understanding of that actually that's not in season right now. And I think that's, I guess, I feel incredibly lucky growing up in New Zealand that we had to eat seasonally because we were so small and isolated. It was just, you wouldn't really think of anything else. So I think that gave me a great kind of insight and education into seasonality and where food comes from. But I think it does worry me to see children these days that don't have that kind of understanding of where food comes from.
Thank you so much. Please go ahead.
I was going to say that's as much it's a middle class and upper class thing as much as a kind of a lower class. If you link it to class systems, the amount of students I worked with that had never seen an onion before, and these were from families who only ever had expensive ready-made meals, and it just absolutely fascinated me in the cafe that people just didn't know what things were because it was only prepared in a box or in a package or in a bag. So that was kind of like terrifying but interesting at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think it is I think, it is amazing. As when I first came to London, I thought, oh my gosh, this is incredible what you can get in the supermarket. Until it kind of dawned on me that actually it wasn't that incredible because half of it had been, kind of flown around the world. And as you say, people didn't be able to appreciate what kind of food is and how it even got there in the first place, I think. I think there's a lot to be learned, and that's, what you did sounds amazing, that, and unfortunately there's less and less of those kind of things happening these days.
I actually have another question for you, if I may, because you mentioned New Zealand, and it just popped in my head that the other day my neighbor was telling me about this really good squid that they found in the supermarket, which was cheaper and very soft and tender. And we're in Cyprus, we're in the middle of the Mediterranean, and that squid comes from New Zealand. And with all these conversations going on about Seaspiracy lately, I don't know if any of you watched it, but basically talking about the fishing industry. And I know that in your restaurants you're being very sensible. I remember specifically ordering trout off your menu. I wonder what your principles are when it comes to fish, and how do you go on about selecting which fish to put on your menu, Chantelle?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, and I think it's definitely sparked a lot of conversation, Seaspiracy. And I think I was always, I think when we reopened last year, I was very conscious about, kind of what was on the menu, and that there wasn't a huge, I think we went from having a really big menu to having a smaller menu. And also, looking at what was the most, sustainable form of fish and seafood. And it was chalk stream trout is one that we've had on the menu for quite some time. But I think it does raise those issues. But I think it's also, a bit of it's like the, meat and dairy as well. And I think it's really important that you kind of understand where everything comes from and how it got to you. I think as as someone that's creating food, as well as obviously, the consumer, but I think it's, now more so than ever is understanding that. And I think what COVID has brought about is the fact that, from my perspective, it's the, I really look at the suppliers I want to work with, and they're the ones I work with. And it, yes, price comes into it, but it's a balancing act. And I think if there's ways that you can make things work and there's ways that you can't, and it's just figuring out what can work for the business, and very much applying those principles. So if if it's line caught fish, that's, obviously best practice in many ways. I think a lot of mussels and clams and bivalves are just, are a great thing to champion as well. So I think that moving forward, we're kind of looking at how to get more of those on our menu as well, and also support, the people that are out there doing the kind of hard work in the actual fishing and collection. I think with what's happened with Brexit as well, it's put more pressure on the kind of fishing industry as well. So it's just, that balancing act of, wanting to support people and livelihoods, as well as wanting to do the right thing from a sustainability perspective.
Absolutely. And even thinking about livelihoods of food producers and handlers and distributors and the whole chain, really. Ben has an interesting question. Would you like to unmute, Ben? Please feel free.
Yeah, I was just wondering what would be the key element that would make a restaurant sustainable? Do you think it's a number? Is it a number of things, or is there one type of thing, one type of behavior that you would encourage, and it would then inspire the rest?
I think there's, as I mentioned before, I think it's a 360 approach, and I think it's, if you kind of think about, there's certain factors, to be totally, I guess, break it right down to the bottom. If a business isn't financially sustainable, then it's not sustainable anyway. So it's, there's many factors that come into it. But I think if we're talking about sustainable in a sense of being, climate friendly, green, etc., I think there's a myriad of things. But I think probably the most overarching thing of importance is the approach and the belief system. Because if you're doing something for the sake of it, not because you believe it, then it's not going to work. So I think actually just, if you adopt an approach that you're conscious about how to be, how to improve what you do, then things should just follow from that. So it's maybe starting with that level of, of the why, and then moving forward to how to do it as a business.
Okay, yeah, like so it's kind of like, I suppose you have to think of like the type of people that you're employing as well. I suppose you were mentioning earlier on that you've been with people for like 10 years. I mean, those guys must be, do you know what I mean? Because they obviously know what to do, kind of thing. They obviously know that, right, okay, so we've got this recipe on the menu, so we can do this with this food, and we can put this element of the food back into here, so we can keep this aside in the fridge and use it kind of later. It's those types of things that help make it a sustainable restaurant. Yeah,
I think, as I mentioned before as well, it's a journey, so it's very much about, it's a learning curve for everybody. But I think if you're all conscious about it and thinking about it, then you'll be doing it anyway. So I think it's kind of just making that first, I guess, stance of this is what we want to think about, so let's think about it, is all really important.
Thank you. I wonder if anyone else from the audience has a question or a comment or something they have experienced that they would like to share in terms of either retaining their teams or sustainability in restaurants and hospitality in general.
I think everyone's got enough out of things, which is good.
I can keep asking questions.
I'm actually on the panel in about 5 minutes time.
Say, I
so
could probably think of a few more questions maybe.
Yeah, I do need to, I think, log on to this next panel that I'm on as well. So maybe if there is any more, one more question at all.
People are saying how much they thank you. Well, I just remember when I came to Treadwell's in September, I think I had butter from Cumshead Farm. Is that correct?
Bread, yeah, that sourdough bread. Yeah.
So I wonder how you choose who to collaborate with, because obviously they're a restaurant as well. So essentially we see a good symbiosis between restaurants there. Do you have any other key players that you collaborate with? And if you have any advice for other businesses in terms of choosing who to partner with?
I think it's just, from a top level, I kind of partner with people that I like as well, and people that I get on with, and because that's, to me, they've got the same ethos. If you can kind of chat about things together, then you're on the same wavelength. And I think that's really important to start. Starting on that kind of foot rather than coming from a different perspective. And I think just, sharing as well. I think, Instagram, for all its, I do have a bit of a love-hate relationship with it, but it definitely, it's a learning tool. You can learn a lot from it, from just seeing what other people are doing, from learning about new suppliers, learning about interesting things that people are doing from a sustainable perspective or for their teams. I think it's a useful tool.
Thank you so much. I personally have asked you all the questions I had.
Good.
I'm very glad we shared this session together, and very thankful to our audience who said that they can't wait to visit your restaurants when they reopen. So just so we know, Treadwell's is opening on the 19th of May, is that correct?
Yeah, both sites on the 19th of May.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Chantelle. Thank you, Ben, for facilitating as well.
Yeah.